Hey guys, we're going to talk about factoring trinomials today, and the trinomials that we're going to be factoring will all be in the quadratic standard form. So the way that looks is ax squared plus bx plus c. And a and b are our coefficients to our variables, while c is our constant. So I'm going to go ahead and write the problem. We're going to be factoring x squared plus 5x plus 6. And we're going to make a list. First thing every time, you make a list of what you know. In this case, what I know are my A, my B, and my C. So my A value is going to be 1. And how do I know it's going to be 1? Well, if there's no number in front of a variable, the default coefficient is always 1. My B is going to be 5 because that's the coefficient of my middle term. And my constant is 6, so my C value is 6. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use this X over here, and we're going to organize our data. So we have A times C goes in the top, and B will go in the bottom. What's going to go here and here are the factors of A times C, that is the numbers that can be multiplied to give us AC, that both multiply to get to AC and also add up to B. And we're going to have to figure out which two those are. So there's actually a couple tricks that we can do to find that information. Now, 6 is an easy number to factor. 1 times 6 is 6. There's only so many numbers that can be combined to give us 6. So let's go ahead and do that. We have 6, and we're going to make a list. 6 can be accomplished by having 1 times 6, and it can also be negative 1 times negative 6. And we can have 2 times 3 and negative 2 and negative 3. Because a negative times a negative is a positive, and we have a positive AC. This number is positive. And we're going to make a second column here, third column, and we're going to say what they add up to. So 1 plus 6 is 7, negative 1 plus negative 6 is negative 7, 2 plus 3 is 5, and negative 2 plus negative 3 is negative 5. And we're looking for the pair that give us the 5. In this case, it's going to be 2 and 3. I'm sorry, I forgot to put that there. So 2 and 3. Now, this doesn't actually mean anything in and of itself. What we need to do is fill in the box here. So the first thing on the box you're going to do is write the problem diagonally. So we're going to have x squared in the upper left-hand corner. Our middle term is going to be in the circle, and our constant will go in the lower right-hand corner. Now, we also know that the two in these empty boxes are going to be the factors that gave us 5, and we're going to put them with an x, because 3x plus 2x is 5x, and that's why we're going to put them there. Now, we need to figure out what we're going to put in the little thought bubbles. And that's pretty simple. In Algebra 1, we're only going to be dealing with x squares, or our variables squared. So in these first thought bubbles, we will always put one of the variable that we're using, whether it is x, t, g, whatever. And then the next thing we're going to do is put in our operations. So the operations that go into the second thought bubble in each one match the box they're touching. So this 2x is positive, therefore my thought bubble touching it will also be positive. Same thing up here with the 3x. And now we're going to pull out common factors. That is to say, we're going to find numbers that can go into both terms, or just terms that can go into both terms. So for example, we have x squared and 3x. What can we divide both x squared and 3x by? Well, the answer is just 1x, so we're going to leave the x alone. Same thing with the x squared and the 2x. We can only divide both by x. Now we're going to analyze the 2x and the 6 and find that common factor. 2x and 6 are both divisible by 2, and so that's what's going to go into this thought bubble. We can't divide 2 by anything bigger than 2. Prime numbers are just themselves in 1, and 2 and 3 are both prime numbers. So with 3x and 6, the common factor is still 3. And that tells us that our answer is x plus 2 and x plus 3. So every time your a value is 1, you'll notice that the factors that I got over here are same as the ones that went into the parentheses. And that's going to happen every time a is 1. However, a is not always 1. In fact, it frequently is not. So what do we do if a is not 1? Well, these simple processes aren't going to work quite as well. So we're going to do a couple of things to change it. So first I'm going to go ahead and clear my data. Okay, I'm going to delete this. I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to delete everything inside the x. But I'm going to leave the AC and the B where they are because that's standard for all of my quadratics. I will always need an AC and a B. I'm going to clear these factors, and then I'm going to clear my list. Of course, I'm going to leave the A, B, and C because I will need those again for the next one. So the next expression that I'm going to factor for you is 6x squared minus 5x minus 21. 6x squared minus 5x minus 21. Now, if we're looking at our patterns, we know we can go ahead and write it into our box. So we have 6x squared in the upper left, negative 5x in the circle, and negative 21 in the lower right. And we are going to make our list. So if we look at our expression, we have an a value of 6, a b value of negative 5, and a c value of negative 21. And so that's the information we need. So we're going to fill in the x. We have our a times c and our b. B is pretty easy. We're just going to stick negative 5 in there. Negative 21 times 6 is going to give us negative 126. Negative 126 is going to take us quite some time to factor, quite a bit longer than 6 would take, because there are many more numbers that can be multiplied together to give us 126. So in order to expedite things and do things a little more quickly, we're going to turn to our calculator. So in our Inspires, what we're going to do is first and foremost, we are going to go to New Document every single time. We're not going to save what we have because we don't need that stuff before. And we're going to add a graph. Now what we're going to do here is we are going to write in our formulas for determining factors and the sum of our factors. So for F1, we are going to just put negative 126 because that is our A times C, and we're going to divide that by X and hit enter. Now we can't see the graph, but that's okay because we don't actually care about the graph. We care about the table of values that we're going to get from the graph. So I'm going to hit tab so I can add a second equation because I also need the sum. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to type F1, open parentheses, X, close parentheses, plus X. So what this is saying is that I want to take all the Y values from my first function and add them to the X coordinates. So once I have that typed in, I'm going to hit enter. And this one shows up a little bit, but again, we don't actually care about the graph. To get the table of values, we're going to hit Control T. And the column we're going to look at is the one with the F2. We were looking for two factors that will add together to give us negative 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down this column, and I'm going to find negative 5. And the two factors that both add to negative 5 and multiply to 126 are 9 and negative 14. So we're going to put 9 and negative 14 here. And we're going to put them into these corners, negative 14x and 9x. And we're going to do the same thing like we did when a was 1. We're going to find the common factors. It's just a little more difficult. Now we have 6x squared and 9x. We need to ask ourselves, what number can 6 and 9 both be divided by? And the answer is going to be 3. Now, if you struggle with figuring that out, or if your numbers are more difficult, again in your calculator, we can hit Control Dock, and we're going to add calculator. And we're going to go to Menu, Number, and then we're going to go to Greatest Common Divisor. Greatest Common Divisor is the same thing as Greatest Common Factor. What is the biggest number that both can be divided by? So we're telling the calculator we want the greatest common divisor of 6 and 9. They must be separated by a comma, and again it tells us 3, like we already knew. And now it's just a matter of solving the puzzle. So we have 6 in our upper left-hand corner of our box, 3x in the thought bubble, so we need to ask us what times 3 gives us 6? And the answer to that, of course, is 2. And now we have to figure out what goes in the second thought bubble. So the thought bubble here is going to be positive because the 9x is positive, and we're going to ask ourselves, 3 times what gives us 9? Or 9 divided by 3 is what? So 9 divided by 3 is 3, because the opposite of multiplication is division, and we're going backwards. And finally, on this thought bubble, we're going to put a negative sign because the 14 is negative, and we're going to ask ourselves, what is negative 14 divided by 2? Well, negative 14 divided by 2, of course, is 7. So our factors turn out to be 3x minus 7 and 2x plus 3. And that's actually all there is to it.